All right, so it is at the time that I'm recording this currently 4:34. Day two of free agency has probably just about ended. There's still a couple of deals obviously coming in. We still have a couple more hours that obviously deals can continue to be done. But overall, I think majority of the deals that were going to happen today have pretty much come to an end. And with that, with these past 2 days of free agency, I figured that we do a very quick full recap of all 32 teams and what they did or what they did not do, and kind of judge them based on the moves and see how they are looking going forward. But before we do that, really quick, I want to encourage you guys to go down below, subscribe to this channel, leave a like on this video, share it with your friends, and comment on this video as well. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You will get to see my latest reactions to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will never miss, for Never the Podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and hop into this. At the top of the order, we're going to be starting with the AFC East. This is the NFL.com updated free agent list. Like I said, there are still a couple of deals coming through, so there's the potential that there are a couple of players on here that are not listed, and I will try my best to go ahead and point those out. But starting at the top of the board with the AFC East, starting in Buffalo with the Buffalo Bills. The Bills made a couple of big-time moves. Probably the biggest of them all was trading for DJ Moore from the Chicago Bears for a 5th and 2nd round pick in this year's NFL draft. And look, I talked about this a little bit on my TikTok. Absolutely love this deal for the Buffalo Bills. One of the big time reasons is because when was the last time that we saw Josh Allen with a legitimate number one receiver ever since Stephon Diggs left 3 years ago? They really have not supplied him with that. They had Amari Cooper for a couple of games. Keon Coleman is fine, but he really hasn't exploded onto the scene like we originally thought. He's a big physical wide receiver, but isn't normally a receiver that's going to get a lot of yak. DJ Moore is definitely that type of player that could serve as your number one guy. Love to see him be the main target on a team, especially because, in the Chicago offense, he was having some of his touches taken away, obviously, from Rome Odunze. And in combination with a guy like Keon Coleman, you put in Khalil Shakir into the slot. Slowly but surely, I think that Joe Brady is going to begin to rework this offense into a more pass-heavy offense, playing to the strengths of Josh Allen. Obviously, the past 2 years, they have tried to lean a little bit more on his running ability as well as James Cook. And while that has worked out and gotten them to the playoffs year after year after year and hasn't really changed a lot for them, overall, I think that it's just too much on the back of Josh. It's too much on the back of James Cook. It's a little bit too predictable of an offense. And overall, when you go up against a team like the Denver Broncos in the AFC divisional round, who had, a stout run defense, who was able to, cause some turnovers, and you can't really supply yourself through the air, you become very, very limited. And that to me was the big time, ceiling changer for the Bills last year. Having DJ Moore implemented that is definitely going to be huge. And while a 2nd round pick is definitely a little bit of a hefty price, as we know, this isn't a very big time talented draft class. So giving it up and sacrificing that for a player of DJ Moore's caliber is definitely money well spent in my eyes. Outside of that, just a couple of re-signees: Dawson Knox, Connor McGovern resupplying that offensive line over there in the middle. They got back Tyler Bass. Not too much more coming out of Buffalo. You move to the Miami Dolphins. Their big-time signing, there was really only one for them as well, and that was them signing away Malik Willis on a 3-year, $67.5 million deal. They, of course, also a big-time move was them releasing Tua Tagovailoa, which officially brings on a total of a $99 million dead cap hit onto them, which is definitely going to strap them. Listen, I like Malik Willis. I do definitely like him as a free agent quarterback. I think that Miami was one of the better options for him going forward because it was a team that can supply to his strengths. If you look at a lot of the good work that Malik Willis did last year for Green Bay in the games that he played, a lot of it was off some big time plays in the screen game, off of some screen passes. I apologize that I cannot talk right now. A lot of the big time plays came off of his running ability. A lot of the big time plays came through his deep passing ability with his big time arm. Definitely when you have speedsters like Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane on your squad, that is something that they will definitely be able to reapply to their offense. Now, obviously, there are big concerns with that offensive line. One big time thing that they have not really addressed within this off season. But again, Malik Willis has mobility. He has legs. He can roll out of the pocket whenever he really wishes and feels like it. So, no offensive line. He can work around that. Obviously, it's not ideal, and you want him to develop a little bit more as a pocket passer. But overall, for Malik Willis, he will have the legs and the athleticism to get out of harm's way if he needs to. And for Miami, this is definitely a big risk, a bigger risk than it would have been for any other team taking on Malik Willis, because they do have $99 million to their name. Now you add in another $67.5 million to a quarterback. That is definitely a big time risk. But if the reward is there, if he is able to develop more as a pocket passer, especially down the middle of the field in the medium and short passing game, this will be probably one of the bigger steals over the last couple of seasons, and he could definitely serve as their future franchise quarterback. And Jeff Hafley, with him, not being in control of the offense, being a defensive-minded head coach, you definitely want to get somebody who is a little bit more dynamic, can work out of his way when plays begin to break down. Malik Willis can definitely go out and do that. The New England Patriots are next, and they added a couple of big-time pieces to their offense, mainly Elijah Vera Tucker on the inside. That was a deal that just happened earlier today. And then also earlier today was Romeo Doubs from the Green Bay Packers at a 4-year, $70 million contract. Now, I definitely do not mind either of these moves for the New England Patriots. Both of these guys were big-time needs for what the Patriots needed on their offensive end. The interior offensive line got torched all throughout last season, and they obviously let go of Cole Strange, who went to another team who we'll talk about a little bit later. So supplying that with Elijah Vera Tucker, definitely a big-time replacement. And then Romeo Doubs is probably one of my favorite number 2 wide receivers in the game. My big issue with the Romeo Doubs deal is I would not have signed him to the amount of money that they are guaranteeing him. It is a 4-year, $68 million deal, and then there are incentives for an extra $12 million. So they're basically paying him about $20 million a season. That is a hefty price for a guy that has still not really proven himself to be a definitive number 1 wideout in this league. And the problem for them is that they're not going to have Stephon Diggs next year. They're not going to have that production from Stephon Diggs, who had more targets out of Drake May than any other receiver on this lineup. And you still have a lot of other developmental pieces. If they're able to bring back Kendrick Bourne, who's still a free agent at this moment. Kyle Williams is still not, established as a number 1 wideout. Doubs is now going to be their biggest receiving option. And that to me is a slight downgrade from Diggs probably at this point. And you're paying him a whole lot of money there. So good talent there, and you're supplementing Drake May. But your offensive passing game attack didn't necessarily improve big time, and you're paying probably a lot more money. The interior of the offensive line is definitely a big-time dub for them, and I like Doubs as a talent. I just don't really enjoy the direction that they went in terms of the amount of money that they spent on this. Then you have the New York Jets, who, as you can see, were clearly very busy in free agency this season. The big-time highlight coming earlier today, which was them trading back for Geno Smith. They traded for Geno Smith from the Las Vegas Raiders, which I don't really know. I'm going to have to do some research and up my knowledge on how that really works, because I thought that the Raiders released him. So I believe that there's potentially a window that they can still trade him, or that they still hold the rights to them. Either way, the Raiders end up getting a 6th and 7th round pick for this. Not really something that I'm really going to dog on the Jets about, because they're 2 day 3 picks. Geno, as bad of a season as he had last year, as many turnovers as he threw last year, how many times are you really going to go out and pick a 6th or 7th round quarterback, or even a 6th or 7th round player, and they're going to be as good as Geno Smith? And at this point, the Jets just really need a veteran type quarterback that can help them test out and see where that offense is. You obviously franchise tag Breece Hall. You have Garrett Wilson in there. Mason Taylor had a pretty good rookie campaign. They have 2 franchise offensive tackles. But the problem was that they didn't have a significant passer in there. They had Justin Fields, who was kind of just, running through the option all game long. Geno is somebody that will put the ball through the air and will really allow you to see where, some of these options really are offensively, and if you should move forward with them. So getting a veteran type presence in there, getting a guy who has been around the Jets organization before, that's a solid get for me. With the lack of value, I will say that they ended up giving up. And then they made a couple of, little signings here. Kingsley Enagbare, I probably really butchering that. Joseph Osai. David Onyemata was definitely the big-time highlight for me from this. I was a little bit surprised that they only signed him for a 1-year deal. But slowly, I think what they really did out of this was turn, some of their big-time pass rushers like Quinnen Williams, right, like Jermaine Johnson II, trading those guys away, but then also we're able to just get more depth at some of these positions. Like Onyemata is going to be doing a really, really great job at fulfilling that inside defensive lineman role in the middle as a defensive tackle, stuffing the run. Devondre Sweat, as he's not, as big of a talent as JJ2, I still think that he can be supplemental on that defensive line side. They got Demario Davis to fill into potentially that defensive that interior linebacker role. And then they also upgrade the secondary a little bit, which they definitely need, trading away Sauce Gardner. Minkah Fitzpatrick is really the big time deal here, trading him from the Dolphins again, only for a 2026 7th round pick. So getting Minkah Fitzpatrick for that type of value, again, you're signing him to a big time extension. He didn't really serve a lot of a big time role on the Dolphins defense in terms of, what he added to it, but it's still a really solid veteran presence. It's somebody that's going to work his way into that safety role. And I'm willing to argue that had they kept JJ2, had they kept Quinnen Williams, had they kept, Sauce Gardner, and then traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick, obviously they wouldn't have been able to make all these other deals because they would have had, a lot less money. But putting that into perspective, if they had that, they could be potentially a team that could compete for an AFC East title if Geno Smith ends up working out and is able to be the Geno Smith that we saw 2 years ago in his playoff run with the Seattle Seahawks. So really, really interested about the Jets. Keep your eye on them. They have a lot of depth on the defensive side now. And if Geno Smith can just be serviceable, an average quarterback, that offense will slowly begin to put in work and put points on the board. Moving into the AFC North, we had the Baltimore Ravens. Their really only big-time deal was obviously the blockbuster deal, trading for Max Crosby. I talked about this a little bit on my TikTok, which, by the way, go ahead and follow that, especially when breaking news is coming out. I make quick, short videos about that. I'm going to make a quick, short analysis about this Max Crosby deal. Overall, I like it. It definitely is a big-time hefty price, especially trading away number 14 overall. But again, this draft isn't too stacked this year in terms of big-time talent. And overall, you now have Max Crosby, who is going to make an impact on that defensive line, whether he's putting up sack numbers or not, because he has a big-time impact in that backfield. You add into the fact that you have Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith in a Jesse Minter type defense that is going to be able to, play within that crafty zone that we saw the Chargers play a year ago. That zone type of defense, that range that they're going to have on that field is just going to give Crosby more time to wreak havoc. He's 100% going to be able to do that on that defensive line. So really solid move for a team that needed a boost on that defense, especially from last year. They were one of the worst defenses in the league. You add in a solid defensive mind. You have rangy players. You add in a all-pro level pass rusher in Max Crosby. Tremendous. Really, really tremendous. And really all you're really giving up, in my opinion, is the 2027 first-round pick, which now that you have Max Crosby, might not even be as valuable, might be towards, the second half of the draft, because you're going to be a much improved team, especially on the defensive end. Then you have the Cincinnati Bengals, who did spend a little bit of money, the real highlight being Brian Cook. Still not a very active free agency window for Cincinnati, as to be expected. That's what ownership is like there. They secured Dalton Risner on what is still a very, very horrible defensive line. But they did add in Brian Cook. That's much needed, reinforcement on the back end for that safety spot, especially with, the work that their corners are being able to give up. You're going to have to give somebody back there who is solid in coverage, solid in tackling. I like the deal, but you just need more. And if you're Joe Burrow, you're still, patting your knee, waiting for them to give you an offensive line, to give you a above average, at least tight end prospect, to give you more work on the defensive line. And they didn't do any of that. But what is it to be really expected from the Cincinnati Bengals? You had the Cleveland Browns, who did a lot of their work on the offensive line, securing it. I think that is a really, really great move. Titus Howard from the Houston Texans, they went ahead and traded for him. That was really all of their big-time deals there. I like it. Protect Shedeur Sanders. Give him some actual time in the pocket to be able to throw. It's a really, really smart move from them. Quincy Williams at linebacker. That defense was going to be great regardless of who they ended up signing there. So not a lot of big-time action here, but they did what they needed to do, securing that offensive line. And hopefully with that, top 5, top 6 pick that they have in the draft, they can go out and get one of those top wide receiver options to begin to give Shedeur Sanders some weapons to go ahead and throw to. The Pittsburgh Steelers were definitely very, very active in free agency. Not only did they sign Rico Dowdle, not only did they trade for Michael Pittman, but they also signed away Jamel Dean, who they add to an already stacked, secondary. You add Jamel Dean into a corner room that has Asante Samuel Jr., who they re-signed, Joey Porter Jr., some really solid safeties in the background. And now you begin to slowly upgrade your offense as well. You're now adding Michael Pittman to DK Metcalf, which I think is incredible. You now have a 1-2 punch of Rico Dowdle, who brings some speed to the table as opposed to the more power back that is Jaylen Warren. To me, this signals to me that Aaron Rodgers is going to be returning. He is going to be coming out of retirement, or they at least have some type of backup plan and confidence in another quarterback, whether that's Kyler Murray, whether that's trading for Anthony Richardson, whether that's maybe bringing Derek Carr out of retirement. That's a possibility. Or they have a lot of faith and hope in maybe a Ty Simpson coming out of the draft. To me, you wouldn't be making these big-time moves if you weren't looking to contend, especially Michael Pittman Jr., who is a perfect supplemental number 2 wide receiver next to DK Metcalf. He's going to be able to do some really, really great work in that vertical pass game. So they must have something up their sleeve when it comes to the quarterback position. But we already knew this. I mean, when you sign a veteran head coach in Mike McCarthy and don't opt for one of the other younger head coaching prospects, especially because there were plenty of defensive head coaching options, you were going to look to make this team the best that you could. So look for Aaron Rodgers to return. Look for them to potentially sign somebody like Kyler Murray, or look for them to go out and draft a quarterback early on, either in that first or second round, to go ahead and plug in there. We move down to the AFC South, a couple of deals that I've talked about a little bit on my podcast, especially the David Montgomery trade. So not really going to go through a lot of that. Outside of that, a couple of re-signees. The Trent Brown re-sign is there. They had the Dalton Schultz, Braden Smith on the offensive tackle. They definitely needed to upgrade their offensive line. Ed Ingram, don't know why they did that. He is not a really great interior offensive lineman, but a lot of this is really just re-signings. The Daniel Hunter trade, Sheldon Rankins in the middle, really keeping their lineup together. And I am really, really interested to see how this offense will now look with a supplemental running attack, because David Montgomery is definitely going to supply that. And now you'll actually be able to put Woody Marks into positions where I think that he flourishes a little bit more, which is more as a goal line back, being able to rush in, truck some people, knock some people over, and go there. You have the Indianapolis Colts. They have the transition tag in Daniel Jones. Still waiting to see if some team will come over to potentially match that offer. You have Alec Pierce, who signed a massive, massive contract. 4 years, $116 million is massive. Arden Key at the edge. So not a lot really here for them. They got Colby Wooden for trading Zaire Franklin. Yada, yada, yada. The Jacksonville Jaguars, obviously, this was another team that wasn't very active within free agency. Moreover, more to talk about the Jaguars was the fact that they lost Travis Etienne. Now they have DJ Dallas intact. They have, who is that other running back out of Minnesota that I continuously begin to forget his name? Why do I always forget his name? Tootin. Yes, I always forget Bashal Tootin's name. I don't know why. So the Jags offense, look for them to potentially take a step back this next year, because now they're not going to have a supplementary running attack. And we'll see. We'll see what type of role Travis Hunter is playing next year in the offense, and if he gets significant playing time there. The Tennessee Titans are slowly becoming probably one of my biggest dark horses coming up in this next season, and we haven't even gotten to the draft yet, where they hold a top 3 pick. They signed Wan'Dale Robinson to help their receiver depth. They get Jermaine Johnson II from the New York Jets. They signed John Franklin Myers from my Denver Broncos. And then they're able to upgrade the cornerback spot as well with Alontae Taylor, Joshua Williams, and Cordell Flott. Holy cow. And you add into the fact that you have a defensive guru in Robert Saleh coming in. You have Brian Dable as your offensive coordinator, who is familiar with Wan'Dale Robinson's game, and his golden job has been to always develop young quarterbacks. The Tennessee Titans all of a sudden are bound to make a massive, massive step up next year. I mean, you're going to have John Franklin Myers next to Jeffrey Simmons and Jermaine Johnson II. You have Alontae Taylor with L'Jarius Sneed at the safety spot. Holy cow. They're going to be able, Saleh is really going to be able to work with a lot of big-time dynamic players in this, especially Jermaine Johnson II. He can play outside linebacker. He can play edge. He could, fill the spot in the interior. JFM, same thing. He could play edge. He could play, on the interior, the defensive tackle spot. You're going to have Sneed potentially doing some safety blitzes off the edge. the Tennessee Titans had quite the offseason here. They are possibly one of my biggest winners throughout all of it. And as we transition from one of my biggest winners, we go to probably my biggest loser. My Denver Broncos. I might make a separate video from this. So not much that I'm really going to say. Overall, really disappointed in Denver. They have been MIA this entire free agent window. Like I said, I think I'm going to make a separate video about this because I want to, deep dive into my team. But they released Dre Greenlaw. It was nice to see that they re-signed J.K. Dobbins. Outside of that, they've kind of sat on their hands. Really, really disappointing from a team that was one game away from the Super Bowl. To see them get worse with the amount of cap space that they had and the holes that they had going into this. I'm going to make a separate video. Let's just move on. It's really, really disappointing. The Kansas City Chiefs, their big-time highlight was Kenneth Walker III, of course, signing for 3 years, $45 million. I don't mind the deal. I'm not a huge fan about it. I wasn't hooting and hollering for it just because Kenneth Walker is not somebody that necessarily moves me as a NFL fan or analyst, whatever you want to call me. He can't block. He can't catch the ball very well. He has a big-time injury history. He really just runs the football. And if you want to get somebody who runs the football, I think Isaiah Pacheco would have done fine. I think that you could have gotten one of the Penn State backs in the second or third round. You could have gone out and got somebody who I think is a little bit more dynamic possibly than like a Tyler Algier or a Travis Etienne, who's a little bit better in the pass-catching game. You don't have a quarterback for majority of the season next year, so there's going to be a lot more pressure put on him. You still don't have a stereotypical offensive line for him to really run behind. Again, we still have the draft, so there's still time for them to fill those spots. Overall, I just don't think that KW Third is really being put into a position to succeed. And I don't think that he's as great of a player as people are really looking at him to be, especially on a longer 3-year, $45 million deal. So he's a good talent, but doesn't bring a whole lot to the table outside of just running hard. And I think that the Chiefs are taking a big-time gamble on that. Moving to the Las Vegas Raiders, they had a very active window as well. Their big-time move was definitely Tyler Linderbaum within the center position. This now allows them to move Jackson Powers-Johnson to the left guard spot, which I definitely really love. Gives Ashton Genty an offensive line to finally run behind. Gives Fernando Mendoza some time in the pocket. And then Jalen Nailor, I'm not ecstatic about it. Coming over from a Vikings offense that was dynamic and he was a big-time part of. But again, not a guy that you're really going to look at as, like a number one type of guy. So they are still definitely going to have to look through that. They also got Taron Johnson from the Buffalo Bills and Quay Walker at the linebacker spot. So definitely a big-time improvement here. I'm also going a little bit quicker through this because I just did realize that we are nearly 25 minutes to this vid. I don't want to make this too long for you guys. The Los Angeles Chargers, a lot of their moves were definitely on the offensive line. You have Trevor Penning, who's going to act as a emergency backup tackle, which they definitely need. Slater's dealt with injury. Alt's dealt with injury. Cole Strange on the interior, and Tyler Bazaz at the center spot. Bazaz is probably one of the better budget centers in this league. So reinforcing, the interior of that offensive line was definitely a big-time weakness for them in the past, protecting Herbert, keeping him healthy, allowing those running backs to have an offensive line to run behind. Good solid moves here for some depth here from the Chargers, although Cole Strange is a little bit of a strange move for me. You have the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys, who kind of just stirred up some spots. Franchise tag George Pickens, Javonte Williams they re-signed, which I think was big. Rashawn Gary for a fourth-round pick I thought was a little bit of an overpay. Has had a little bit of trouble with injury, hasn't had a lot of big-time production, but is definitely still a very talented pass rusher. And I'm also sad to see my boy P.J. Locke from my Denver Broncos go at that safety position, shed a little bit of a tear. So you upgrade, the secondary a little bit, upgrade the pass rush, and then are able to shore up two of your more offensive stars. Definitely big time there for the Cowboys. The New York Giants, they had some favorable moves as well. I definitely love Isaiah Likely becoming their starting tight end. I've loved Likely for Baltimore, and I think that getting Jackson Dart as much talent on that offensive end as you can is definitely permitted. Greg Newsome immediately, to me, becomes a top 2 cornerback for them. Very good value signing and depth signing there. And then Tremaine Edmonds, I thought was a bargain for at 3 years, $36 million. $12 million a deal. That was only $6 million more than what the Bears gave up for Devin Bush on the Browns. Devin Bush, to me, isn't even arguably, on the level of a Tremaine Edmonds. So now if you're the Giants, you have a defense of Tremaine Edmonds, Kayvon Thibodeau. You have Brian Burns. Greg Newsome is going to fill in as some corner depth. That defense is now scary. So we'll see what John Harbaugh can bring to the table. Definitely brought his A game here into this offseason. And like the Tennessee Titans, the New York Giants are one of my dark horses in this upcoming season. The Eagles, this is not the only move that they had. They also just signed Tariq Woolen at the time that I'm recording this. This just happened. They signed Tariq Woolen to a 1-year, $15 million deal. I am tearing my hair out because the Eagles continuously begin to get big-time defensive players. They now have a secondary of Tariq Woolen, Cooper DeJean, and why did I forget his name? Quinyon Mitchell. A 3-headed monster within that secondary. Now, they did lose Reed Blankenship. They did lose Jalen Phillips. They did lose some substantial people on that defense. But you might have the most talented secondary in the league now. The rich continue to get richer. The Washington Commanders weren't as active as I really thought that they were going to be either. A lot of these are really just re-signings, and the big-time thing is they didn't really sign anybody substantial to that secondary game, which with them losing Marshawn Lattimore is definitely where they're going to have to fill. So look for this team to be targeting secondary within this year's draft, but not a lot of big-time things to really cover. The NFC North, the Chicago Bears obviously had to cover a little bit of their back here because they lost Drew Dahlman to retirement. They ended up losing Tremaine Edmonds. We just talked about the Devin Bush signing, but outside of that, Kobe Bryant definitely adds a little bit of depth to that secondary. Garrett Bradbury is an average, center to fill in. So overall, I think that they did an okay job at filling in some of the holes. They lost DJ Moore, so they're definitely going to have to look to add maybe one more receiver to that receiving core to both Luther Burden and Rome Odunze. They're going to have a little bit worse of an offensive line. But the secondary additions are definitely huge for them, which was a big time need for them over the previous year. Also, not a notable pass rusher here, which is definitely also a position that they needed to fill. So they did okay, but they're definitely a little bit worse of a team than they were last year. The Detroit Lions, they signed Isaiah Pacheco to be their David Montgomery replacement. Cheaper option. I still think that Gibbs is going to get majority of that load. And they also got Juice Scruggs to fill in on the interior of that offensive line, and Larry Borum, which is significant because they could potentially be losing Taylor Decker soon. The Green Bay Packers, not a lot of big-time moves from them. Zaire Franklin was really the big-time move. I like that, especially with Micah coming off of injury. You're going to need to have continuous linebacker depth, but not a lot of movement from the Packers. Not a lot of movement from the Vikings either. We move to the NFC South. The Atlanta Falcons, who went ahead and signed Tua Tagovailoa to a 1-year veteran minimum. I was right about one quarterback going to a team. And honestly, why not? You can't really blame them for doing this. You're getting the guy on a veteran minimum, left-handed quarterback that will fit pretty seamlessly into your system, get you a little bit of quarterback competition for Michael Penix coming off of injury, and just see what you have. You have a young offense that you need to capitalize on. You need to just start throwing darts at the dartboard here, especially with Kyle Pitts, you giving him a franchise tag. You probably have one more solid year of having him on your team before you now have to really convince him to want to stay. So getting Tua, obviously the play has decreased, but you kind of have to just start throwing darts and trying to get this offense going, especially with your defense now starting to show better play over this past season. The Carolina Panthers were also a team that had a pretty active and pretty substantial offseason. I think the two biggest signings were 100% adding to the linebacking core with Jalen Phillips and Devin Lloyd. Devin Lloyd's somebody that I really, really wanted the Broncos to go after. They now get a dynamic, very, very athletic and quick, versatile interior linebacker. Jalen Phillips, if he can stay healthy off of that edge, is definitely a big-time signing as well. And they add that to Isaiah Simmons. If you look at this Carolina Panthers team now, especially when you add into the fact that they are still going to be able to add some offensive depth in the draft to that receiving core, potentially opposite of Tedero McMillan. Obviously, Rico Dowdle is a huge loss, but running back, you can find running backs almost anywhere. But you add Devin Lloyd now to Nick Scorton. You have Jalen Phillips now. J.C. Horn is still one of the better cornerbacks in the game. And then you have Derek Brown on that defensive line. You're starting to really, develop a little bit of a pass rush there. And so this, especially in a weaker NFC South division right now, they now emerge as one of the top players there, and definitely enjoyed some of the moves that they made there. The New Orleans Saints, they also made a couple of very interesting moves. Noah Fant at tight end, trying to get Tyler Shuck some much-needed passing game help. Julian Blackmon at the safety position is also a really good signing to bring him back. Travis Etienne, though, was the big head scratcher. The big head scratcher was just, what are you going to do with Kamara? Are you going to do a running back by commission, or are you going to give Kamara away? Because I think that it goes without saying that Travis Etienne is automatically going to become your number one option. I mean, Kamara, he has been dealing with injury, was not too effective last year when he was running on the ground, getting a little bit older. And then you add into the fact that you have Kendre Miller still, you have Devin Neal, you have Audric Estime. There's plenty of young running back depth here, so definitely look for Kamara to be an option. Etienne is fine. He's had, over the past 2 years, a little bit of some ups and downs, but overall, I think that he should be suitable, still work within the passing game, which is important when you have somebody like Tyler Shuck. So decent signing, just going to want to see where they go and what they get out of Alvin Kamara. Caden Ellis is also a pretty solid move over there at the linebacker position. Tampa Bay Bucks didn't really do too much outside of Alex Anzalone at the linebacker spot and then reshoring up Cade Otton. You had the Arizona Cardinals, who didn't really get very aggressive at the quarterback position. They added Kendrick Bourne. They added Tyler Algier. So that is definitely some well-needed additions to that offense. But Gardner Minshew was their big-time quarterback, a guy who's coming off of a substantial knee injury. So look for them to draft a quarterback potentially, or maybe they're still looking into maybe an Anthony Richardson or whatnot, but they didn't really get too aggressive at the quarterback spot, which is really, really interesting. Maybe they're punting. Maybe you punt for 1 year and they just save for 2027, because 2027 is a very, very stacked quarterback class. So I could understand if they just end up punting, getting a top, pick for next year and getting somebody like an Arch Manning. That could definitely be a play. But a couple of, solid offensive additions that they definitely needed, adding to the offensive line, which is definitely great. LJ Collier, who I think is one of the better guys on that defensive line. But overall, just was very curious as to them not being overly aggressive at the quarterback spot. The Rams, their big-time move was Trent McDuffie. Don't want to go too into that because I already talked about that, especially a lot on TikTok. So go ahead and follow the TikTok. The Seahawks, they didn't really do anything, but I sped past both of those teams because the final team that we do have to discuss was obviously Mike Evans going to the San Francisco 49ers on a 3-year deal. Massive, massive surprise here. I just always thought that Mike Evans would be very, very loyal to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I do understand that they're a little bit on the downslide. He is injured. He did get injured last year. So getting his last big-time deal and getting into a dynamic offense with the 49ers, he now is next to Ricky Pearsall. For the Niners, very smart. They're not going to have Ayuk going forward. Pearsall got injured. Jennings got injured. Kittle got injured last year, so they needed to add depth to this offense. It's going to be a very, very fun offense. CMC, Mike Evans, Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, all of those guys are going to make this offense very, very dynamic. You're just going to have to be on injury watch with this team to make sure that they go ahead and stay healthy. But Evans, he was another guy that I wanted the Broncos to go after. He's a solid veteran presence. He has reached 1,000 yards for every year of his career outside of last year, which is where he got injured. Even at his older age, he's still one of the best wide receivers in the game. And the Niners, to me, are now lined up at least to be one of the best offenses in the league next year. But let me know what you guys think about all of this. What did you think about the analysis? What did you think about these signings? What was your favorite? What was your least favorite? Who did your team pick up? Who did you want your team to pick up that they didn't end up going after? How frustrated are you for your team that they didn't do absolutely anything? Hint, hint, the Denver Broncos. But like I said, I'm going to save that for another video. Let me know about all of that down below within the comment section, as well as subscribing to the channel, leaving a like, and sharing this with your friends. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You will get to see my latest reactions to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will never miss for whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. Hope that you guys have a great rest of your day, and peace.